Hello my friends, welcome to my corner. Notice anything different? Of course my friend. I upgraded my copy of The Breakfast Club. The one that I had before was this old one that shows you the screen as a rectangle, all surrounded by black in the middle of the screen. I didn't really like that, so I just got a new version that has one of the anniversary editions of The Breakfast Club. I also cut my hair, by the way, but we're not here to talk about The Breakfast Club or about my hair. That's a topic for another video if you want. Just let me know and I'll do it. We are here to talk about a very different topic. Many years ago, or actually just a couple of years ago, I started a series on the films from the Vatican's list of great films, so this video is a continuation of that. But it is also a beginning of a new series that I decided to title From the Page to the Screen, which, as the name suggests, is about adaptation. So that's kind of the context in which this video should be seen. I have chosen, as a point of departure for this new series, and also as a continuation of the old series of the Vatican's list of great films, the film and the short story Babette's Feast. The reasons why I chose this one will become apparent as we explore the two texts, okay? So the short story on the one hand and the film on the other. But before we begin, I did want to say this. This video reveals aspects of the plot, both of the short story and of the film. So I thought I had to say that this video contains spoilers. I have a lot of ideas on the concept and the nature of spoilers, but once again, that's not the topic to be discussed today. So we might go into that on another occasion. So I'm going to be talking about the film and the short story kind of at the same time, but for the most part, I am going to make a little bit of a division when it comes to discussing the texts. So first, let's focus on the short story. Babette's Feast is a short story that was published in 1952, but it appeared in book form in this collection titled Anecdotes of Destiny for the first time in 1958. This book is very important because it was the last book that was published during the author's, Isak Dineson's, lifetime. You can find the story here. It's the second story in the collection. It is exactly 45 pages long, and I noticed a kind of a folktale quality to it that I really liked. The story takes place in a puritanical community in Norway, where two sisters, Martine and Philippa, live with their maid, Babette. So in the story, the life of the community is described in great detail, and also we hear quite a bit towards the beginning of the story about the sisters' youth. So when they were young, when their father was around, the father, by the way, was the pastor who actually established the community. And we also hear in a flashback about the two men who fell in love with these two women. One of them was a general, General Löwenhielm, and the other one was a famous singer from Paris named Achille Papin. Let me tell you a little bit about the plot here, because that is the situation. It's not really the plot. The story actually revolves around the character of Babette, the French maid that takes care of the cooking and other things for the sisters. And she is a foreigner, of course, and she is also a Catholic in a Protestant land. So the locals see Babette as a bit of an interesting or perplexing oddity, and maybe even as a dash of color in this very austere community. She is a total mystery to them, and that's something that makes her quite attractive to the community in a way, because all that the sisters know about Babette is that she was recommended by Achille Papin, who sent her from France to Norway, that she has a lottery ticket that's going to become very important to the plot of the story, and also that she may have escaped from France due to her political ideas. This, by the way, is an element that is not present in the film. The main plot element of the story is, as I said before, the lottery ticket, right? So Babette at one point says that she has won the lottery, so she has actually had the winning number of this lottery, and she requests that the sisters allow her to prepare an authentic French dinner for the community in the occasion of the celebration of the late pastor's, because he's not around anymore, 100th anniversary. So that is the main event in the short story and in the movie also. So let's look at some themes now that we have talked about the plot. What is Babette's Feast about? I think at the most basic level, you could say this is one of those stories, one of those films about food. okay? But most of the time, if you ask people that have seen the movie, what is it about, they're going to mention two concepts: gratitude and self-sacrifice. About gratitude, gratitude is definitely a plot element or a theme in this story. Self-sacrifice, on the other hand, is a theme in the movie, but not exactly in the story. But there's more about this to come in a few minutes. Another theme that you're going to find here is mistrust of the foreign element. When the sisters, for example, see the ingredients that are going to go into the meal, this authentic French dinner that Babette is going to cook for them, they associate what is going on in their kitchen with witchcraft, because they see this turtle, right, all of these chicken feet and things like that, and they're like, this looks like a witch's sabbath or something like that. But something that we do have to say about this element right there is that, at least I believe, it is meant to be a humorous element in the story. So beware of taking that part, the witchcraft element in the story, as a very serious thing. This is just the way that the local community, or at least the two sisters at first, perceive what Babette is doing. There's a very important parallel in the Babette's Feast that I thought about as I was reading the story. I could not help thinking about James Joyce's The Dead. Okay, there are many parallels between Joyce's novella and Denison's short story. Both are about a celebration. In both cases, we have sisters, elderly women, as hosts. There's also a very important meal. Somebody gives a speech, right? And there are more elements that you could say are parallel between the stories. But a small detail here: everything goes well in Babette's Feast, and everything goes wrong in The Dead, as you may know if you have read that novella. I would say that, in a way, Babette's Feast is maybe the other side of the coin to The Dead. But in any case, I recommend reading the two texts back to back. Both are unforgettable, and both feature great examples of prose in English. So, just a recommendation for you. I was reading some criticism about Babette's Feast when I experienced the story, or after I did. I have this book right here. There's not much to the cover, but it is titled Understanding Isak Dinesen by Susan C. Brantley. And one thing that she mentions that I thought was very interesting, that I hadn't realized, was that at many points throughout the story, characters find themselves at a loss for words. And actually, in some cases, they even borrow words from other characters, things that were said before. For example, Philippa's words to Babette at the end of the story about her meal are exactly the same words that Achille Papin said to her about her singing. So this is what Brantley has in mind when she speaks about a loss for words, and also this idea of echoes throughout the story. It's something that is probably very easy to realize, but I had not noticed it. So I want to give credit to the critic for mentioning that. And in that way, right, if we think about this idea of loss for words, Babette's Feast is actually a story about language also. It's not only about food, because Babette is struggling with the Norwegian language because she is a foreigner, and especially at first we see that she has difficulty with the language. But towards the end of the story, at the climax of the tale, she actually communicates through food. So food is a kind of language also. And speaking of language, Isak Dinesen was Danish, but she wrote in English. So she is one of those great ESL writers, just like Vladimir Nabokov or Joseph Conrad and many others. And her prose is considered to be among the most exquisite in the English language. So I personally find her to be a very good source of inspiration, because I am also, an ESL student and an ESL writer also. So those were my thoughts, generally speaking, about the short story. We can now move on to talk about the film and focus on the adaptation, this translation of the text from the page to the screen. So first of all, let me give you some general information about the movie. You're going to notice from the very start that there's a big difference in the adaptation of this short story. The action has moved from Norway to Denmark. Okay, this is understandable because Dinesen was Danish. Gabriel Axel is also Danish, the director of the film, and actually this is a Danish production, Babette's Feast. At the beginning of the movie, we hear a narrator's voice. Okay, and this is very good because it actually gives us a taste of Dinesen's prose. But then, almost immediately, very soon, this narrator's voice just vanishes. And I thought that was okay. I thought that was a good choice because we don't really need this narrator's voice in the movie. We just need it at first to kind of set the tone and also to let us hear the words of Isak Dinesen. The opening of the movie I thought was great. In just the first 2 or 3 shots, they show us, this small, austere community in this Danish fishing town. And right after that, we see the sisters as they are today. So they are elderly. And right after that, we get the flashback in which we can meet the pastor, the sisters' father, and also the men who fell in love with these 2 women who are at the center of the story. But some would say, well, isn't Babette at the center of the story? I mean, it's to be expected, right? Because the title is Babette's Feast. So she is definitely one of the main characters of the story. And I would say that in this case, if you watch this movie, right, from a European or American audience, the actress that most people are going to recognize is Stéphane Audran, okay, who plays, of course, Babette. You may have seen her in the films of Claude Chabrol, or maybe in The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie by Luis Buñuel. She has a role in that movie also. It's one of my favorite movies. That's why I mention it. There is also a brief appearance in Babette's Feast by Bibi Andersson, but she appears for, I'm literally talking about a couple of minutes, 1 minute and a half, 2 minutes, or something like that. There's a very interesting thing that happens when you watch the movie that I thought was a very good decision on the part of the filmmakers. The first time, when we first see Babette, we do not see her face. We see her from behind. We see her taking food out of the oven, carrying breakfast on a tray. I think this is great because it really emphasizes the fact that to the community and for us, right, to us as spectators, she is what she does. Okay, she is primarily associated with the function that she carries out. In this case, she is the maid. She is the one who cooks. It is only after she has taken the food from the oven and then to the table that we finally see her expression, her face, which is so important in cinema, right? Remember what Bergman said, that the cinema is actually about the human face, primarily. So this is one of those movies that basically depend on the performance of the leading character. And in this case, we have the added element that she doesn't speak much because she is a foreigner, right? But she has other ways of communicating. For example, as I said before, through food. So Babette does not really have as much screen time as you would expect by the title of the movie. That is something that caught my attention. That is why I was kind of drawing your attention to this idea. Who is the protagonist here? Is it Babette? Is it the sisters? We have many options, really. It's really up to us as spectators when it comes to making that decision. So because she does not have a lot of screen time, precisely for that reason, every second counts. And I think Audran gives a fantastic performance because she makes the most of every second. The scene that I'm going to cite to kind of illustrate this is when she tries the local soup, which is an ale and bread soup. Okay, there's this part where she tastes the soup after the sisters have taught her how to cook it. So the sisters are basically teaching her the food language of the place, and she tastes the soup, and her expression there says it all. And it lasts 1 second. So that's what I mean when I say that she made the most of every second in this film. And regarding the character, since we are talking about the title character, let me share with you a little bit of trivia. Actually, Catherine Deneuve had been considered for the role of Babette, okay? I'm a big fan of Catherine Deneuve. She can do anything, okay? But I think that would not have been a good choice for this movie. And I'm going to say this, that's probably the reason why she didn't accept the role. So let's talk specifically about adaptation, right? What happens when we take this from the page to the screen? I would say that Dinesen's prose is just so beautiful that much is lost when you take this text from the page to the screen. However, I'm going to say that also much is gained, because there are many details in the movie that in the story you just read about, you just hear about through description. Here you actually see, right? And there's nothing like seeing. For example, we see how Babette learns the Danish language. In the story it was Norwegian, in this case it's Danish. But we see her acquiring the language through her interactions with the grocer, for example. There's also another important scene involving the grocer in which Babette tells him that the only thing that ties her to France is that lottery ticket. In the short story, we just hear that one day she told the sisters out of the blue that she had this lottery ticket. In the movie, I think they polished that a little bit more. They made it more interesting and I would say more true to life, right? She's having a random conversation with the grocer and she just happens to reveal this, which in the short story I felt was not done as nicely as in the adaptation of the film. There are also a couple of great creative moments in the movie that I really liked, and both of them last very just a few seconds, okay, or a couple of minutes in some cases. The first one is a dream or nightmare sequence in which we actually see the ingredients that are going to go into Babette's dinner. And this is where, in the movie, the element of witchcraft is introduced in a very effective way. In the short story, you just hear about it through description, once again. And the other moment that I thought was very nicely done, there's a very brief scene, once again, seconds only, in which General Löwenhielm talks to his younger self. He visualizes himself when he was younger, sitting on a chair, and he actually has a little bit of an exchange with his younger self. And I thought that was very subtle, right? Because this is a movie that is quite understated. That's how I would describe it. There are no camera tricks. There are no, most of the action takes place indoors. So using a showy cinematography would have been completely against the very nature of the story that we are presented with. It really reflects the austerity of the community. So that is one way in which the filmmakers made a good decision when it comes to adapting this text to the screen. The ending, okay? Let's talk about it. And this is the place where, as I was saying before, you may encounter some spoilers. There's a big difference, okay, between the short story and the film. Not so much in the sense of what we see in the film, because what you see is going to be the same. But I'm talking about the inner lives of the characters and also the motives that they may have for the actions that they carry out in the movie. As I said before, many people consider Babette's Feast to be a film about self-sacrifice. Remember, I was kind of questioning that at the beginning. I said gratitude, yes, but self-sacrifice, I'm not so sure about that, right? In the movie, when we come to the final scene, the sisters say to Babette, "Oh, you didn't have to do all that for our sake," right? And Babette responds, "It wasn't just for your sake." I want to focus on that, okay? Please remember that. It wasn't just for your sake. Now let me read you how that happens in the short story. And you're going to notice what I mean by a big difference right there. So the first speaker that we have is Philippa, okay? "Dear Babette," she said softly, "you ought not to have given away all you had for our sake." Babette gave her mistress a deep glance, a strange glance. Was there not pity, even scorn at the bottom of it? "For your sake," she replied. "No, for my own." She rose from the chopping block and stood up before the two sisters. "I am a great artist," she said. So let me highlight that again. "For your sake," she replied. "No, for my own." So she doesn't say it wasn't just for your sake. She says it was not at all for your sake. It was for my own sake. And please remember that the meal that she just cooked, the community who is enjoying this meal, they have no culinary knowledge at all, basically. The only one there who can and does enjoy the food in its proper context is General Löwenhielm. So the others really have no idea what they are tasting in a way. They may enjoy it, but it's only at that level, the hedonistic level, if you will. I think in the film, right, we have this idea of self-sacrifice because this changes completely our perception of Babette's character. If Babette had said in the film what she says in the short story, I don't think she would have come across as likable as she does in the film. So I think in the short story, instead of self-sacrifice as a main theme, I would speak more about art. This is a story about art for Babette, right, from her perspective. One final comment about the ending. I just wanted to say this. Look out for that last shot. It's very simple, but I think it's a perfect ending to the movie. I thought it was wonderful. You'll see what I mean when you watch the movie. As you may know, Babette's Feast won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film back in 1987. I have not seen all of the movies that were nominated that year, but I have seen Au revoir les enfants by Louis Malle, and this is actually one of my favorite movies. It is also included on the Vatican's list of great films, so more to come about this movie at some point. But let me say this, as much as I love this movie, and I do love it, okay, I think in this case the decision to give the award to Babette's Feast was actually a good one. I actually agree with that decision. But, and I'm going to share a little bit more about this towards the end in the bottom line section of this video, that was not my initial reaction when I first saw Babette's Feast. But hold that thought. I'll tell you more about that soon. And also the other issue that I wanted to cover, besides this Academy Award thing, is what I mentioned at the beginning, which is the Vatican's list of great films. It was included under the religion category. So as you may know, there are three categories. We have religion, art, and values. This was considered to be a representation of the religion category. And I can see why, right? It's about a religious community, right? About the contrast between the Southern Catholicism and the Northern Protestantism and things like that. But I can also see, this movie being included under art or under values just as easily. But once again, I can see the relationship between religion and, which is one of the themes of this film and the film itself. This, by the way, is Pope Francis's favorite film of all time. Okay? Now, especially if you look at the film and you ignore the short story. I don't know if he has read the short story, but if you just look at the film, it has Pope Francis written all over it, right? These ideas of gratitude and self-sacrifice and all that, and especially the concept of the meal bringing the community together. This was a community that after the pastor's death, that it began to see great discord between the members, but the meal brings them together and changes everything, right? It transforms them. So it's just like the Last Supper in a way. So let me say this, I was not surprised at all that this was Pope Francis's favorite movie. But that's just, some context in terms of the Vatican's list. Bottom line, the first time that I watched Babette's Feast, I saw it and I was like, good movie. That was basically it, right? This time what I decided to do was to read the short story. By the way, this was my first experience of the work of Isak Dinesen, and it's not going to be the last, I can tell you that. So I read the story and then I rewatched the film. And let me say this, I believe that there is much to be gained by doing that. If you plan on watching Babette's Feast, I highly recommend that you read the story because it's very short. I'm going to say this also, I think that great films stand by themselves. Regardless of whether they are based on a previous text or not, a great film is going to stand by itself. But sometimes, maybe most of the time, many times, I believe that our experience of the written text really enhances our experience of the movie. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to recommend Babette's Feast as a short story to you. By the way, another interesting element here. There's an American remake in the making, apparently, at least on the stage of an idea, at the point that apparently is going to be directed by Alexander Payne. Great director, okay? But I don't know about you, but I don't really need a remake of Babette's Feast. That's just my opinion, but it is there. Do you want more movies about food? I'm going to show you two of my favorite movies ever. They happen to be about food. I'm not a big food person. I have a weak stomach. I have stomach problems and I can't eat much, at least not at this point. But, just two of my favorite movies happen to be about food. The first one I have shown you before in a previous video, many months ago, and that is Ratatouille, which is one of my favorite animated movies. And then the other one is a great movie by Ang Lee. Let's see if you can guess which one it is. I am talking about Eat, Drink, Man, Woman. This movie was remade also as Tortilla Soup. I haven't seen the remake, but I do need to rewatch this film because it's been quite a while since the last time that I saw it, and this is just one of those movies that completely blew me away and that have stayed with me all this time. Do you have any questions, comments, recommendations, recipes? And this time I really mean it with the recipes because we are talking about movies about food. Just let me know. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. Those were my 2 cents on Babette's Feast, the short story by Isak Dinesen, and also the great movie by Gabriel Axel. Let me say this, please pardon my accent, and I hope that I'm not saying something that I'm not supposed to be saying, but I'm just gonna do this. Mange tak, mina vänner. Hej och vidunderligt.